And we're off. Excellent. Welcome, everyone. For those of you who don't know who I am, I will keep introductions relatively brief. It's not a huge part of what I do to impress you or make myself seem more credible in terms of my background or my credentials, but simply put, I have been coaching in different capacities for about 20 years. I brought my coaching approach to business in several different arenas in real estate investing, in small business, tech, all kinds of things. One thing I will toot my horn on because I thought it was rather unique is I got to work with who I consider one of the greatest CEOs in American history, Jack Welch, who built GE to the largest, most profitable company in the world before he retired. And I worked with him to build a top 25 MBA program, which the reason I'm super proud of it is because it was around a time that Thunderbird shut down one of the marquee MBA programs in America. Cornell was struggling to get students, and we were growing 40% year over year. And one of the reasons was because I brought a coaching approach to admissions and the way that we were able to build that program. And so it shifted the way people felt heard and felt understood and the way we talked to them, making it much less academic and more people-based, which is really what Jack was all about when you were able to get beyond some of the media influence and some of the things that I think anyone at that caliber could certainly be misunderstood as well as, make mistakes. So and then most recently, I had partnered with my father in a company that represented the Augmentino legacy, as well as built some phenomenal tools. Worked with him for the better part of a decade, and for the last several years have been out on my own. And that's been an extraordinary experience on a lot of levels. So I love to do these webinars when I feel called to do them, and this is one of those times. For whatever reason, I wanted to get on here and share some things that come from the coaching that I do, which is just about all that I do is personal coaching, and then I do mentorship groups in a container called the Unmarketable Coach Project. And so I get the opportunity to see people week in and week out, to go deep, to build businesses, to work on culture and structure and leadership and all kinds of things while all connecting it to the human experience and the depth of the human experience from affective neurology, psychology, spiritual aspects, energetic aspects. I've had a pretty huge gamut of the human experience, been very obsessed with it since I was about 11 years old. And with that said, one of the elements that has become more prominent in my work is what I think a lot of people, although just as I'm hesitant to call myself a coach, because I go through this slideshow of like assumptions that someone makes about me when I say coach, and as I'm sure like therapists can also relate, and just about any like unique individualized profession, that I'm sure chiropractors can relate in terms of like, no, I'm not like that kind of a thing. That healing has become very present in my work in the last 5 to 8 years, especially, and specifically with high performers, at least people that have tried to be, and some that seem to be very deeply wired in that identity to the point that they almost feel like I'm getting in an argument with them just to get them to start to feel into their own body. And it can be very threatening. And it's become more and more apparent in terms of people's curiosity in spirituality, which for me, just to have a baseline for everyone, to me, spirituality is simply the quality of your relationship with what you don't know. Again, spirituality is the quality of your relationship with what you don't know. You can take it anywhere else from there for you, but in this container, when I talk about spirituality and different things like that, that's what I mean. I mean the kind of approach to what we don't know that allows us to be more connected and inclusive and really seeing the human in each other. So one thing that I don't think is being talked about as much as I've got my fingers in a lot of pies and connected to a lot of different networks and a lot of different industries. in healing is what I want to talk about tonight. And that is a couple of things. One is the unspoken and often consciously unacknowledged fear that a lot of high performers or those who have tried to be high performers have that have created something of significance, whether that's of financial significance or legacy significance, or whatever it might be, the unspoken fear and sometimes unacknowledged fear that to actually heal, they're going to have to give that up. They're going to have like that rich man in the New Testament, go give away all your stuff kind of experience. Even when you ask them directly, it's usually like, yeah, no, of course not. But there seems to be this deep resistance that if I go in and I actually uncover what I was using for fuel to create this and realize it's not really sustainable. It's not really aligned with my human animal and my soul and whatever you want to call that, that I'm going to end up discrediting what I've built. I'm going to end up having to tear it down and start over. And that's just not the case. A lot of the inadequacies, a lot of the compensatory measures, the way we cope with things that we use to drive, even in violent hustle and whatever else, is usually still connected at its core to true gifts and true desires. And so one thing I love to do is come in and provide scaffolding for those people so that they don't have to demo the building that they've created in their life, that they can start taking a little section at a time and recalibrating it. And also, I also on the other side of the same coin, it seems to be inverse, and we'll talk about that more tonight. I love working with the people who have found a softness and a contentment in their soul for just this peace and this quiet that they've craved for so long, but more often than not invites constant rationalization of their financial picture. Um, of I have enough, but and just as it's difficult to get a high performer to acknowledge the fear of losing their edge if they were to actually go inside and feel and soften and heal, at times it can be very difficult to get the more peaceful side of that, to see the isolation that has been created to have that, and not because that's inappropriate. I want to be really clear. We're going to touch on some really sensitive stuff tonight. And I hope that in the brief summary and some generalization of what I can only cover in an hour, I hope that it is initially provided to you that I want to offer this to get the conversation started and still provide significant value for your time here tonight. And please understand, we only have so much time, and just if you could give me the benefit of the doubt that it is with an understanding that there is tremendous nuance, there is tremendous unique elements to this for each and every person. And so rather than just being like, so if you feel that way, then that's your shit and you got to work through that. I don't want to be dismissive. Okay. And at the same time, please understand that some things might come up that sound like a misunderstanding, and I'm not asking you to not feel that. I just hope that you'll be with it rather than be consumed by it, so we can still get to the end of this for things to be considered, chewed on, and digested. Is that fair? If we could have just a little bit of holding tonight loosely, not to just dismiss it, but also not to grab onto one little thing that distracts us for the rest of the night in terms of the overall picture we're trying to paint, and hopefully some really practical, helpful things that you could implement or integrate into your go. So before we even jump into the topic, I'd love to just give us a chance to land here, to get grounded in this present moment. One of my favorite ways to do that is with breath. I think the most powerful technology that you can possibly learn in this life is breath, movement, and sound, and very unconventional, some people might say really weird versions of those things. Um, so because we use breath, movement, and sound every day as human beings, we just use them very concretely and very systematically, and we've missed some of the art of that expression. And in fact, some of the art of that expression is not considered appropriate in public places and whatever else. Like your 3-year-old is not allowed to have a tantrum, which is really just letting energy out with sound and movement because it's disturbing to everybody else. So yes, we must oppress that child's natural expression as a human animal to take care of everyone else. But that's a conversation for another day. All right. So to do that, this is one of my favorite breath works. I learned this from Eben Pagan, who's an amazing human and kind of a pseudo mentor of mine. And it's a very simple way to be able to be ready, more ready for something, significantly more ready for something than you were before. It uses a little bit of kind of the psychology of what like a sniper might use. Right now, let's just think about that in terms of like a target and not like a living person being on the other end. And so snipers are shooting targets that are incredibly far away. Um, and oftentimes time is essential in doing so. However, there is a saying that smooth is fast, or slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And so this breath work has 3 parts to it. It's very simple. You can do as many rounds as you want. We'll probably just do 2 or 3. I'll walk you through the first one and then I'll let you, and then we'll do the second one together. And then the third one you can do on your own. So it's very simple. It's focus, relax, and decelerate. Okay. Focus, relax, and decelerate. The first breath is your focus breath. So you're going to take a breath in and then you're going to exhale, blow it out like you're trying to blow out candles on the other side of the room. Okay. And when your eyes are closed, as we do this, okay, I want you to imagine that all the things that were going on today, all the things you've been thinking about in your day and in your life today are kind of still swarming around the orbit of your brain. And when you breathe in, it's going to pull it all in, and then you're going to blow out and allow it to come into focus right in front of you. Does that make sense? That's the visual. You don't have to do any of these things with your hands. You're just going to take a breath in and go and blow the air out like you're trying to blow out some birthday candles on the other side of the room. Then we'll let that land. Then we'll take a breath in and we're going, this is our relaxed breath. So I want you to imagine the visualization is that you're like inflating yourself like a balloon and then you just let it go. And okay, you don't have to do a raspberry, but like just exhale like a sigh, exhale like a, okay, so you inhale like inflating a balloon, and then you just let it go and you relax and you soften every possible thing in your body. One of my favorite things is I was taught by a somatic coach of mine to just soften your belly and let it land in the bowl of your pelvis, which was actually made to hold it without having to be so tight and core all the time. Okay. Then the third breath is your decelerate breath, which is one of the most powerful ones in this trio. And that's where we're going to take a big breath in and then like a tiny little coffee straw, we're going to exhale as slowly as we can. Okay? And the visual for this one is imagine you take your breath in and then a butterfly starts flying in front of you and then all of a sudden it goes into slow motion. It's like, whoa, won't. And imagine that visualization allowing your heart to slow down, your mind to slow down, and even imagining everything around you start to slow down. So that's it. Your focus breath, blow it hard, relax, just let it out and soften, and then decelerate, breathe in, and slow everything down. That is the sequence for performance. I've taught this to professional athletes. And it absolutely changes everything. So they mess up something on the field and they come off and they're like, I can't believe I threw that interception. And they come off and they do their focus breath and then they do their relax and their decelerate. And suddenly it's like it gets to jump the train track that they would have been heading down and psyching themselves out and feeling like they need to make up for it and whatever else. This is awesome to do before difficult conversations. This is awesome to do before wonderful connection. This is awesome to do before Zoom calls or interviews or whatever else. Okay? Everybody game? Sweet. Awesome. So if you're in a place to do so, you can find your feet flat on the ground and your hands resting on top of your legs if you can. If not, just find yourself in the best possible position that you can be. I like to do this one with my eyes closed, but please, if you're operating heavy machinery, including a vehicle, please do not do it with your eyes closed. So we're going to start with the focus breath. Okay. So everybody take a big, deep, gentle, deep breath in and blow out the candles. Then taking your next deep breath in. This is the relaxed breath. Inflate the balloon and then just let it out. And just soften everything you can like you're a rag doll. Then a full deep breath in. And this is your decelerate. Purse your lips and just exhale as slowly and calmly as you can. Try to soften everything else as you're doing this. And just imagine that butterfly. Whoa, 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 whoa. Just going into slow motion as you're slowly exhaling. And when you get to the bottom of your breath, you don't need to strain and hold it any longer. Just land in your regular breath and just relax. And then when you're ready, we'll come back around, taking a full breath in for focus. Breathe in, blow it out with that focus breath. Big breath in and relax. Big breath in and decelerate. Slow everything down. And this time, when you're ready, go back around on your own with the focus breath, the relax, and the decelerate. And then just land and open your eyes when you're ready. Well, I think we're about there. I don't want to be too disruptive, but we do still have a topic to get through. Excellent. Who notices a difference right now? Okay, just about everybody. Very cool. Yeah, one of my favorites. One of my favorites. It's your pocket knife breath work. You can take it with you everywhere. To be able to do that. And there's hundreds of others that I could teach you, but it felt really important as I was preparing for tonight to like let's all land first, even if it takes up some time, because slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So, all right, let's talk about liminal ambition a little bit, okay? Because as we go through this, this isn't about adding pressure. I'm hoping to not over-explain this, and so that will leave some gaps for you to feel through and notice. And I would ask that as you do that, you give lots of runway for that to feel through and notice versus diagnose, analyze, judge, fix, get rid of, whatever else. So we want to discover the way that peace and drive can coexist because they don't talk about how when you get into healing and you still want to create something in this world. You still want to create what Florence Scovel Shinn called wonderful service for wonderful pay, regardless of what it is that you want to do. A lot of the people that get attracted to me are in positions of leadership, running businesses with teams, or coaches of some kind. And so super important to be able to connect with that. But they don't talk a lot about how when you really find stillness inside of your body, that the hell yeses and hell nos you used to be guided by get really quiet. And you almost feel lost because you're looking for like these street signs that were glowing neon when trauma would like drive you to run away or whatever, but you would justify it as that's my gut instinct and whatever, even though there was so much dysregulation and trauma and shame and attachment wounds that it was very difficult to tell the difference between your pain and suffering and you. Um, so so people don't talk a lot about how lost you can feel when you land in the stillness. Just like people don't talk a lot about how if you haven't done genuine, like trauma-informed, nervous system connected self-care before, that self-care doesn't feel like self-care at first. People don't tell you that everyone can relax. Um, but if you have a hard time with it, you don't have a hard time with relaxing. You have a hard time with what shows up when you do. And so the conversation tonight is a little bit about when you do start to cultivate the spaciousness. That's really what liminal space is it's spaciousness, which is required for more options, which is what freedom is. If you've ever craved any version of freedom, time freedom, financial freedom, freedom in general, the simplest definition of freedom is more options. The challenge is with a dysregulated nervous system that most people have, more options is paralyzing. They teach you this in sales and marketing. Who's heard this? Don't give them too many options. You paralyze the buyer. If you give them too many options, they won't buy anything, right? April, you're not giving an offer with like three options. Hey, which price will you sell your home to? Like it's going to freeze everything up. You just pick one. However, when operating within yourself, we crave this sense of freedom, but most of us kind of started behind the eight ball in terms of having the spaciousness to consider all of our options and then find a new version of ambition that comes from a place that a lot of us didn't even know existed. It's quieter, it's softer, it doesn't have a push to it as we're used to, an impelling force because of the way we've been conditioned for motivation and momentum to drive us. And we'll talk more about that as we go in. So, my promise to you tonight is that hopefully by the end, you'll see where your ambition can come from in a more aligned and sustainable way, and how to source it from what from what would be called a place of power instead of pressure. And that's a continuous exploration. It's not like, oh yeah, I landed in stillness and spaciousness, so I just need to figure this out now and I'm all good to go. No, as it talks about in an incredible book called The Transparent Self, as soon as you disclose or learn something about yourself, you've immediately created an idea of you that is outdated. And the version of you that you were so sure about is immediately shattered. So, for example, just all of you attending tonight, the idea of yourself that you had before you came to this Zoom tonight has been shattered. It's immediately outdated. Sorry, I should have warned you. My bad. I didn't ask for consent. That was just what was going to happen. So, but I'll stick around afterwards to try and, Humpty Dumpty anybody that really feels the need to figure it out before we finish here. Okay. Thanks for those of you who are giggling and laughing. I'm a big fan of like, this stuff is sacred, but it's not serious. I think being able to separate those two is unbelievably liberating in so many amazing ways. So, um, and if conversation tonight, simply put, if the conversation tonight feels like home, then there'll be a chance later to keep walking together, and we'll talk about that when we get there. So let's talk a little bit about unspoken fears, wanting to create resonance and curiosity. So a simple question: do you ever feel like your peace costs you progress? And then on the other side, do you ever feel like your progress costs you peace? Like it's almost like, okay, it's time to drive, it's time to push. It's a season. I hear that a lot in a lot of the high performers I work with is like it's planting season, it's harvesting season, it's whatever season. And it's like, wow, it always seems to be a season of violence, a season of abuse, followed by a brief burnout that we call rest, and then figuring out a new version to dress up the drive and the hustle and whatever that doesn't give a energetic gag reflex. So most high performers fear that real peace will steal their edge. And most I struggled with what to call the other side, high performers. And so what I settled on was peace protectors, which doesn't sound, I don't know, just roll with me. And if you have a better one, throw it in the chat and I'll consider that next time. But for right now, just for categorical distinction, we've got high performers and peace protectors. High performers are worried that real peace they'll lose their edge, and peace protectors are afraid that pressure is a violation of their boundaries and could shatter their calm, and for good reason. And we'll talk about why. But to frame the paradox, both high performers and peace protectors, I have also talked about it as the drivers and the Zen masters, But I don't mean that in terms of actual Zen as like the Buddhist practice. I just mean in terms of like being Zen. I think we all kind of get the essence of that. But the paradox is that both are running on the same nervous system patterns. Just one has an underlying addiction to activation, and the other has an underlying addiction to avoidance. Ouch. Okay. One has an underlying addiction to activation, and the other has an underlying addiction to avoidance. More often than not. Like I said, there's nuance here, there's whatever. Okay. But the bridge we'll want to consider is that liminal ambition is a quiet middle path where calm and chaos can dance. And why do we want to learn the dance of calm and chaos? Because we're creators. We want to intentionally create. And creation, the recipe is equal parts chaos and equal parts calm. Okay. And when we overdo one, we get stuck or create something we can't sustain, and vice versa. And so learning to dance with calm and chaos is the dance of creation. There are two similar paths that lead to opposite poles. There's quite a bit packed in here. Okay, so I want you to just we'll unpack this as best we can tonight. A high performer. Okay, you ready? A high performer, trauma, shame, attachment wounds. Okay, that's that we're seen to be dangerous and threatening. So trauma, shame, and attachment wounds that were seen to be dangerous and threatening. That's a differentiator. And so achievement became the way to both fight it and then freeze. We talk about survival patterns, fight, flight, freeze. Freeze is not actually like a reaction. It's a freezing of the reaction to see if you can use either one of those later. If your nervous system can't figure out which one to use, which it does in less than a third of a second. And then if it can't figure that out in that time, it freezes. So a high performer, trauma, shame, and attachment wounds that are seen to be dangerous and threatening. And so achievement becomes the way to fight it. And then they freeze from burnout because of the deprivation of calm. And even to the self-deception that the burnout is calm when it's really like calm in terms of like you've been being punched in the stomach all day and now you're getting flicked in the ear. Like, oh, that's so much better. Just out of comparison. But like because achievement and because of the fight response, it takes until burnout, it takes until pushed way beyond your limits to justify not doing it. And then we try and scramble for some kind of calm or recovery. But the challenge is calm would then be let in best you can in a burnout state, but then it would be repelled for the heroic charge back into battle. And that's what feels like success to a high performer is that charge back into battle. It feels like success and the cycle starts over again. Okay. So a couple of keys there, trauma, shame, and attachment wounds. They are seen as dangerous and threatening, and achievement becomes the way to fight it, and burnout is the freeze. In the peace protector, peaceful warrior, whatever, I'll find one that fits for me better later on. The peace protector, same trauma, shame, and attachment wounds. Okay, not the same trauma, shame, and attachment wounds, but trauma, shame, and attachment wounds are present in this archetype, this person. However, their wounds tend to be seen as abusive and oppressive rather than dangerous and threatening. I need to fight this. They're seen as way too much. They seem so big that the best option is to become small and to run away. And so how do they run away? Isolation. Just as the high performer uses achievement, the peace protector uses isolation to run away. And just as the high performer freezes with burnout, the peace protector freezes with depression. Okay. And these can be intermixed. I've met a lot of peace protectors in a way that started as high performers, but they didn't reach a tier that was like that kind of kept them there. They didn't reach altitude, if you will. And so the next best version was to kind of find what was reasonably sustainable in performance and then find peace and isolation to just make it feel better. Okay. Again, some of these are sweeping and generalized, so please let's hold this softly. I'm not saying this at any of you at my very best. Okay. So, and just like calm would be let in but then repelled, chaos starts to get let in as a way to try and shake up the depression, try and get out of this space, but then it gets repelled for an intoxicating relief. We let in just enough chaos as a peace protector to then repel it and get the relief of having let in chaos and then isolated against it. And it's like, ah, I found my peace again, when really we just kind of let chaos in and then kicked it out just to feel the contrast. Um, and that gets misidentified as peace. So many people that have found peace and stillness but want to contribute and create and struggle financially, more often than not, it's because their system has confused peace for relief for peace. Relief feels very passive, but very similar to peace. Peace is gentle, it's soft, but it is a forward moving energy. Okay. Relief is a beautiful thing. Burnout is a beautiful thing. Dissociation is a beautiful thing. Coping mechanisms. These are all beautiful things. We're not here to make enemies of any of these things. We're simply pointing out misidentifications, lack of conscious awareness of when and where we are doing certain things, because one of the great and frustrating truths about us as human beings, the great part is we are unbelievably agile. We're masterfully agile, but the very mechanics, energetically, neurologically, physiologically, that make us agile and adaptable are the exact mechanics that make us unbelievably masterful at self-deception. They're the same mechanics neurologically. So if you consider yourself a very agile, very adaptable person, in large part it is because you are fantastic at self-deception. Now, there's some things about that that are kind of interesting, kind of cool, when they're in alignment, like hypnosis. You can't hypnotize and get someone to do something that they wouldn't, that they are absolutely against doing. Okay. Not without pharmaceutical intoxication included in the hypnosis. Okay. And so there sometimes being able to deceive yourself, as weird as it sounds, gives you an opportunity to step back from the identification that you had, to detach, to soften your grip and different things. So again, as weird as it sounds, we're not making enemies out of any of these things. Okay, because the more judgment we bring into this, the more we go, because notice these are two sides of the same coin. The more we go, oh my gosh, I'm doing that, the more at risk we are of jumping to the other side and then coming back. And while we want the full spectrum of our experience between the performance and the peace, we want it to be a little less violent as we flow and dance between these. We want to flow on the dance floor, not run everybody over or trip and blow our knee out or run into the walls. Okay? So it's a shared problem. And I think that there's something really empathetic about that. So, but often we start to see this is why what used to work no longer does. Because for high performers, achievement through adrenaline and the threat response works brilliantly until, okay? Like it's amazing until the system can't sustain it without major sacrifices and often very unnecessary ones. The goalposts keep moving. That's one of the other challenges with this achievement through adrenaline and threat response is we keep getting this dopamine drive and it keeps writing checks it can't cash. But we just assume if we just keep going, eventually all of those bounce checks will be this pile of money in our bank account, energetically, metaphorically, or literally. And it also strains relationships. For the peaceful side, safety through isolation and avoidance feels spiritual until the nervous system gets stuck in low gear. We become dependent on charitable reciprocity. I'm all about charitable reciprocity, but being dependent on it is very difficult and difficult to recognize, difficult to notice. And also, similar to high performing, it can create relationship strain. So, I mean, biologically, both are trauma adaptations, one of them in fight, one of them in flight, and both landing in a version of freeze again and again in their own way. So, which side right now, just take a second. Okay, we might need to do a focus, relax, and decelerate again. Um, but just take a moment to just land where you are and just consider which side feels more familiar to you lately. You don't need to answer out loud. Just kind of consider one isn't better than the other. One isn't, neither of them are bad. Like whichever calibration you're in right now was or possibly still is exactly the calibration that you needed right now. Like whatever your system has done to get you to this point has been perfect for you. It's just really scary to accept that because there's this in a dysregulated nervous system, there's this terror that if we actually embrace who we already are, that we'll never become anything different. Well, good. That's the point. You're not here to become something different. You're here to become more. You're not here to swap out your leased car for a different car. You're here to add features. You're here to expand your capacity, but you're always going to be the same core vehicle. Something beautiful about that. And all the versions of you are always going to be in there. Sometimes that's devastating for people to realize. Like, hey, did you know that healing actually doesn't get rid of any of the shit inside of you? It just allows it to feel more at home, allows you to use it differently, to change the narrative, allows you to build some different practices that don't feel quite so, ugh. Okay. So, when drive comes from survival, success expands distress. When drive comes from wholeness, success expands with capacity. When peace comes from isolation, it's an escape. When peace comes from wholeness, it is an expansion. Expansion is what both are looking for, and that happens in the dance in the quiet middle of the two. So once we see how both high performers and peace protectors are often stuck in nervous system loops, we can start to redefine what ambition really is. Okay. So redefining ambition, liminal ambition, is the drive sourced from regulation, from presence, from embrace, not reactivity, being reactive to you or your life or whatever. It's creation without contraction, which a lot of us are doing. So whole body mindset is a big part of what I do in personal coaching, creating a map for how you navigate all the parts of your mindset. Most people have only been taught how to navigate the intellectual side, the neocortex, the thinker side of things, whether they've been taught a more therapeutic approach like cognitive behavioral therapy, or they've been taught more of a personal development, Tony Robbins kind of thing in terms of peak performance or positive thinking or whatever else. Most people only address the thinker mind, but then you're missing the whole neurological network of the heart, quite literally, not just poetically, and the whole neurological network of the gut, which we're actually starting to find out that the brain is a command center or excuse me, is not the command center. It actually gets a lot more guidance and instruction from the heart than we ever realized. If you ever want to look up kind of what we're learning about heart rate variability, which is a very subtle measurement that we didn't find until just the last little while. And then the gut as well, which can override both, is wild. It's amazing. But we thought this was what was in charge. Also, something interesting. Anyone ever heard like, oh, we're only using a certain percentage of our brain? Okay. Off topic a little bit, non sequitur, but I happen to be someone who is experienced with intent and set and setting in places that it is appropriate and legal, psychedelic experiences. I've gone to the jungles and drank the strange brews, okay? So that you didn't have to. No, if you want to, cool, go for it. But I am not here saying that that is something that is required for anyone. I have a very interesting personality. But what's interesting is in the psychedelic realm, if any of you have experienced things like that, most of them enhance your senses. Okay. Most of them enhance your sensitivity, your hearing, your touch. You are more aware. Whereas like alcohol, you're more dull and whatever and different things, and which is why people love it, because then you don't have to feel what you were spending all day avoiding feeling anyway. And now you get to just kind of and not have to put so much work into not feeling it. But what's interesting is they were shocked on an fMRI when they found out that when you use these substances that alter you, your brain activity actually goes down. You have these unbelievable visions, awarenesses. You're actually like clearer in how you can hear your own thoughts that most people are. And your brain activity actually goes down. What an interesting thing to consider. That there's many theories out there pointing out that the brain might actually be a throttle or a governor to your consciousness and not necessarily the expansion of it. So really interesting things to consider. A little bit of a rabbit hole. We won't dive down any deeper than that tonight. But keeping in mind, in the whole body mindset model, the head provides the exploration, the clarity, the vision. The heart part of your mindset provides the coherence and the connection, and the gut part of your mindset provides the courage and the instinct. And as we start to allow these three to dance more collaboratively, more cohesively, and we don't need to continue to identify with our trauma and our shame and our attachment wounds, which is a way more level playing field than people realize. We don't have time to go into all these tonight, but one thing I do like to point out to anyone who's like, yeah, I don't have trauma. Cool. Every human being on this planet has gone through the most traumatic thing a human being can experience. That's birth. Period. End of story. If you understand being a purely sensory creature, what that could possibly be like, to have no sense of self, identity, logic, anything, and you go from warm, rhythm of the heart, all that to blah, cesarean or vaginal, whatever it is, which I'm pretty sure every human on this planet, experienced one of those two options. Okay, that like that is as traumatic as it gets to your human animal, because that's where trauma actually happens. It happens in the human animal, not in the human consciousness, not in the neocortex. Okay. And so there's a very level playing field in all these things. But when we can get the head, the heart, and the gut to align, ambition becomes regenerative. Ambition becomes regenerative, and not the kind of regenerative that you're planning on getting at the finish line. Meaning every step of the marathon of your life creates additional energy for the next step. That's the kind of regenerative that liminal ambition can provide. So there's all kinds of people I've studied and mentors of mine, Ken Wilber, Peter Levine, Bessel van der Kolk, David White, Stanislav Grof, and others that provide so many resources in being able to do this that I've been inspired by in the creation of the whole body mindset. So just quick self-assessment. And this is probably something you want to come back to and go through a little bit with a little bit more intention and patience. But number one is, do you feel unsafe when you're still? And that's probably a question to be answered when you're actually still. And none of these are purely yes or no questions. The trick is, can you hear the parts of you that may feel unsafe when you're still? Or have we just listened to the majority? Number two, do you ever feel useless when you're not producing, when you're not in go mode, when you're not in action? Number three, do you ever feel anxious when opportunity knocks or seems to show up? So the places you answer yes or are able to feel into the different parts, that's where you get to start meeting the edges of your liminal work. So the promise of the work is to move into awareness that then naturally creates aspiration. So I had a client that when I was working with them, they were so fast-paced and so achievement-driven. They'd say to me, I operate better when I'm busy, and I'm at my best when things are tough. Okay, anyone here relate? Like, oh, I'm at my best when I have a lot going on. That is a trauma response. It's a beautiful one. Super glad that you figured out how to make the most of that. And there's nothing belittling or less than that you did that. Okay, there are far worse things you could have considered, but even without the comparison, like you really made the most of what you had to work with, and that is not only admirable, that's courageous. And if you landed here in some way, shape, or form, you there may be some part of you that is feeling that maybe that's not the way I want to keep on going. Maybe there's some different things to consider. Maybe there's a new game to play. So this client of mine letting me know that like, oh yeah, when shit hits the fan, that's when I'm at my best. And they didn't realize how secretly terrified they were to really lean in and look at what was fueling that. It's almost like they had a sense that it would ruin everything, even to the point that the closer we got to some of the stuff inside, they would sense, and thank God they would say it out loud. I'm noticing that I feel like you're my enemy, and all I'm doing is like holding space and just giving them permission to let some things be seen and felt that they hadn't had permission to do ever in a lot of cases. And eventually, we were able to get in and start to feel, and some of the nerves that you get in and feel in trauma and shame and attachment wounds can feel like if I touched that, I would die. If I actually felt that, I would die. And in a lot of cases, especially for a lot of high performers, it's really important to show them that they can slow down slowly and that it can be gentle. A lot of them have been taught to drive through punishment, and we'll talk about that more in just a moment. But one of the best parts was this client learned to play a new game. And it's one of my favorite games to see my clients be able to have the nervous system to support. And the game is, what is the least amount of work I can do to be worthy of abundance? What is the least amount of work I can do to be worthy of abundance? AKA, how can this be easy? As a recovering high performer, um, easy was a curse word. Easy was a bad word. Easy was what lazy, entitled pieces of crap are looking for and want out of life. Um, and man, wow, it was really abusive programming that was emulated and taught to me by someone who had it emulated and taught to them by someone who had it emulated and taught to them, and we'd go on and on and on and on if we wanted to figure out who to blame, rather than, let's feel it, let's work through it. And so the old way was fear that would create drive and achievement, like powerfully, volatilely, but then burnout. And the new game became presence and alignment, creation and expansion. And people don't talk about how terrifying that actually is. It's unbelievably rewarding when you find out in your body that it can be easy. But the transition to that is can be really scary, and next to impossible on your own. So, but the truth of the matter is, ambition was never meant to be a whip. Okay, it was always meant to be a compass. That's really important to remember. Ambition was never meant to be a whip. It was meant to be a compass. We could talk a little bit about like Lewis and Clark another day, but I want to get through some practices for you to consider. But punchline there is Lewis was on assignment of achievement and Clark was on assignment of expansion and exploration. Lewis was focused on finding the water pathway that Thomas Jefferson asked him to find from where they were to the ocean, and Clark was curious about what was between here and the ocean and achieving their assignment. But Clark found much more fulfillment. Lewis killed himself. So interesting punchline for the achievement driven and the curious, expansive, curious or present one. So let's go through some practical frameworks before we finish the night. Let me share my screen. Oh, whoops, that's not what I wanted. Share. There we go. Okay. So how to create liminal ambition. Now, the application of these and the nuances, and also a lot more than this, is very unique to each individual, but I wanted to at least allow you to walk away, not allow you, help you walk away with hopefully some good considerations for where to start this conversation, where to take it next in some practices in your life. Practice number one is awareness. Track the source of your drive. So a daily reflection, for example, of actually asking yourself on a consistent basis. This is great to do in your car where you can ask yourself out loud, going for a walk in the morning and asking yourself out loud. Notice this is out loud. If you need to put some AirPods in so people think you're on a phone call and not, batshit crazy, then rock and roll. Do you? It's much less weird to talk to yourself out loud these days because people assume you are on the phone, whether it's through your sunglasses or AirPods they can't see under your hair or whatever it is. It's awesome. So it really supports good, healthy, good, what I call healthy schizophrenia, which is actually a phenomenal. That's just a really nasty way of saying parts work. But anyway. So what's fueling my actions right now? Proving, protecting, or participating. That's a really good way to start. Is just start to become aware. Am I in a proving energy, a protecting energy, or a participating energy? Here's the toughest thing about this, though, is none of these you'll want to receive as bad versus good. Awareness is not judgment. It's awareness. Okay. It's non-dual. So it's not, oh, proving is bad, protecting is bad, participating is good. No, it's awareness. The good is you noticed you were in a proving energy, or the good is you noticed you were in a protecting energy, or the good is you noticed you were in a participating energy. Nothing to prove, just finding the awareness. That's one of the challenges with doing that. You want to take it a step further, start to journal them. Track how often you check in and whether it's a reactive, which is the proving, the avoidance, which is the protecting, or aligned, which is the participating, and just kind of get an idea and see some colors or just some letters to see how often you check in and which one it seems to be. Again, we're cultivating awareness here. And awareness, one of the key elements of awareness is you're not getting it to solve or fix or get rid of anything. You're doing it to enhance your consciousness. A lot of high performers struggle with that because they assume if I become aware of something, I have to do something about it. And that's often what makes their lives so painful and violent. Key insight, awareness dismantles unconscious conditioning. The judgment will choke your awareness. That's why it's so important to not go there. And that's can be difficult to learn. But if you can find a way to support your system in figuring that out, which is a trust thing, then you can really start to reap the rewards of awareness without even having to build these habits and different things to make the change, which more often than not are manipulative, which doesn't mean they're bad. It just means they're short term. Okay. So, and a good micro reflection for this is where did I notice survival running my ambition today? Not because that is bad, just because we're cultivating awareness, which is super important no matter what you're going to do and anything you're going to want to work on. Practice number 2, regulation, breathe, ground, recalibrate. Mini reset. Use what we started today with. Focus, relax, decelerate. There's box breathing. There's triangular breathing. There's grounding, getting your shoes off and touching the ground, whatever else. There's lots of different ways to give yourself a mini reset. In fact, if any of you work at a desk or the same environment most of the day, set an alarm if you're a high performer for every hour. If you're more of a peace protector, every 29 to 30 minutes. And when it goes off, get up. Do some jumping jacks. Go grab some coffee. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Just get out of the position you've been in for as long as you've been in it. It's an amazing reset and it will loosen your grip on what you're so convinced you have to do. And it starts to soften your attachment to motivation and momentum-based thinking, which is really painful at the end of the day, compoundingly painful. A somatic cue, unclench your jaw, drop your shoulders, as I teach all of my clients, to find your feet, find your hands, find your breath. That's a simple somatic technique of just like before we breathe, put your feet on the ground, kind of screw your feet into the ground like a baseball player or a golfer would before swinging. Put your hands on top of your legs, maybe softly rub your legs or just kind of tap your fingers softly. You want it to be gentle and soft because you don't want to be distracted by the movement. You're just noticing it to feel your body and find your body, which most of us spend most of our day outside of our body because we're dependent on the thinker brain, which is everywhere but right here. But then you find your hands and then you find your breath. So that's a really good way to recalibrate. The message is that calm is not passive. It's precision for your nervous system. So notice, as if you're a high performer, notice the threat of calm. Notice the threat of, and even the relief you're craving for getting the job done, which is what causes us to to willingly self-abandon over and over and over again because we keep convincing ourselves that we can abandon that part of ourself and get to the finish line, and somehow magically that part of us is going to end up at the finish line. But like imagine you're running a marathon with your inner child and you get to mile 12 and you're like, I need you to stay here or we're not going to make it. And so you abandon your inner child and you go to the finish line. Your inner child's still back at mile 12 no matter what you did. Okay? So, a micro reflection, what signal does my body give when I'm forcing instead of flowing? And I'm trying to stay as close on time as possible. So, forgive me if this is feeling a little bit too X. I'm trying to honor that without pushing too far past our time. Practice three, repatterning, replace hustle with honesty. This is such a powerful one. Okay. Am I chasing relief or creating resonance? Am I here or headed somewhere? That's such a great question. Not because one is wrong and one is right. Again, we're practicing awareness through all of this. But am I here or am I headed somewhere? And just starting to become aware of what happens in your body with those two things, not because one is good, one is bad, but how conscious are you of which modes you're in? How conscious are you of resonance versus chasing the finish line of relief? I don't know any performer who is driven, who hasn't convinced themselves that there's some point they're going to reach where they won't have to be so driven, whether they admit it or not. It's just really interesting considerations, and see if you can start to replace guilt-based productivity with this awareness with devotion-based productivity. Okay? Devotion-based productivity. This one, what is devotion-based productivity, you ask? Well, funny you should ask. This is small because I tried to fit it all into a slide, but for those of you who want to connect after this, I'd be happy to provide any of this stuff to you, and also you'll get the recording so you can come back to this. Devotion-based productivity is presence over performance. Much easier said than done. It is the integrity of pace. Lao Tzu said nature is never in a hurry and yet all is accomplished. Try to compete with that. Boom. All right. Resonance over relief. That's a difficult one to unwind, especially for those of us who have found the benefit and the appropriate one of isolation. Because some peace protectors are highly sensitive individuals who have been through unbelievable abuse. And there are high performers like, yeah, so was I, but I didn't need isolation. I didn't. Cool, good for you. You're a different person. Okay? Having your own unique experience. But those of you who have found isolation, I have no judgment for you. It was very appropriate, more than likely very appropriate for you to find isolation to be able to quiet your nervous system. I'm more speaking to those who have been in isolation long enough, and it's starting to feel unrecognizable or a little uncomfortable in ways you can't quite explain, which is your system saying, great, we spent enough time here, it's time for more. Energy reciprocity, that regenerative ambition that we were talking about, okay? And contribution-based consciousness, okay? Just checking the chat. Oh, I apologize. Some people asked some questions along the way, and I'm getting a little bit caught up in the time. So, but luckily I have a way to resolve that I will share with you at the end. Micro reflection. Where could honesty and presence replace effort this week? Such a cool question. You hear that? Where could honesty and presence replace effort this week? Okay. A mentor of mine once said that some of the greatest gifts that God has for you are packages you need to sign for. So make sure you're home enough to do that. And home being literal and or metaphorical, depending on the person. So it's very interesting when you start to allow honesty and presence to replace effort. It's also interesting the way that that feels selfish. Just like what's the least amount of work I can do to be worthy of abundance sounds selfish, but people that wanted to control us many years ago convinced us that self-sacrifice was noble because it was a fancier sounding word than self-abandonment. There's nothing noble about that. That's like being the person who gives everybody a ride and never stops at the gas station. There's nothing noble about that except for the handful of rides you were able to do before you ran out of gas because you didn't know how to take care of you. In fact, you were taught that that was selfish. Because when you run out of gas, then you're at the mercy of someone who can provide it and they get to control you. Practice 4, Expansion, reintroduce challenges consciously, shift from avoiding triggers to training your system, and you want to learn how to make a game out of this. Super important. And if you don't know what titration is, if you don't know about the body and the nervous system's threat response and how unbelievably sensitive it is in both high performers and peace protectors, you're going to want to learn that. Okay, you want controlled exposure, and you can do this directly and indirectly. You can do indirectly with cold plunges, breath work. You can do it more directly with public speaking, even lots of different ways you can play games with social media and more. Okay, growth requires dosage, not deprivation. So we'll want to understand our rhythm, not the rhythm that was impressed upon us before we could consent. Repatterning sounds a lot like raising a young child. Okay. I was raised in a very fundamentalist religion, and it has some wonderful things about it. It has some not so wonderful things about it. Anyway, I left, and I'm grateful for a lot of the things I experienced, but I'm so glad that I left. And it was interesting. Years later, I went to an event that I was asked to speak at, and I wanted to attend as well. And it was the first time I went to an event that was like intimate, and they were very much like a tribe and whatever. And at the end of the night, we had a dinner break before coming back for some entertainment, and I had a panic attack. And I didn't understand it. And so I called my coach, and fortunately he was available for an SOS. And we regulated and we dropped in. And what I realized was it was the first time I had been back in like an organized tribal space like that since I had left my religion. And my nervous system thought I was going back into a cult. My nervous system thought I was going back into something that I experienced. I'm not saying this is what it is, but I experienced it as that. And I experienced it as incredibly impressive to the exploration and the expansion of me. I'm not saying that's what it is for everybody. That was my experience. But my nervous system thought we were going back into that. I knew I wasn't, but my nervous system didn't know. And that's where a lot of people get stuck in a tug of war, is they assume because they know, their nervous system must know. When I was a power lifter, you'd lift unbelievably ridiculous amounts of weight for 2 to maybe 4 reps. And then you need to let your nervous system recover if you want to rebuild your strength. And the brain would feel like it was ready at about 90 seconds, 60 to 90 seconds. But the nervous system actually wasn't ready for another 5 to 8 minutes. So I always remember that. And repatterning the nervous system sounds like talking to a young child. It requires a lot of repetition, very kind words, patience, and a lot of repetition, and more kindness and a lot of repetition, because it doesn't operate in explanation. You can let your brain explain to your nervous system all you want. It's not sticking. It works in patterns. And that's really important to understand if you want to really cultivate and repattern for liminal ambition, that regenerative ambition. So a good micro reflection, where might I safely stretch my nervous system next is something interesting to consider. Reframe your discipline. Talk a lot about this in different places, so I'll be brief here. But the core definition of discipline is punishment. It's one of people's favorite medals of honor is how much discipline they have, and you've got to have discipline. I totally disagree in terms of how it's taught in most cases. The joke is we have been convinced that punishment is the only way to get what we want, aka discipline. The truth, punishment is the way to overwhelm your intuition and triangulate your imagination to get what others have convinced you that you want. The more you are going after something that is not aligned with you and your soul, the more discipline is required, the more punishment is required. However, I want you to reframe discipline, not dismiss it. Discipline at its best is a pause, not a push. Like when you climb in a cold plunge and everything in your body says you're going to die, and then you pause, which requires some discipline. You don't push through it, you pause and you breathe. And suddenly your body goes, oh, we're not going to die. We are really cold though, but we're not going to die. And there is a massive difference between we're going to die and we're cold. That's one reason I've been very drawn to cold plunging energetically, spiritually, emotionally, is to feel that pause and be present with that pause, not just push through the cold. Integration principle, your peace is not the end of ambition. It is the ecosystem. The dance of calm and chaos is not a conflict, it's choreography. Finding the energy. Energy is a flow you participate in, not make happen. This is such an important one. We could do a whole session just on finding energy. We're so convinced we create it. Being you creating the energy of the project, the energy of the inspired idea you have, the energy of finding clients or whatever it is like assuming you create the air you breathe. No, it's there and you breathe it and it gives you life. Same with energy with liminal ambition. Is the energy is something you flow with, you tune into. And if you don't follow through, more often than not, it's for a couple of reasons. Okay. It's because you got ahead of the energy, so you're trying to drink water that hasn't been poured yet, or it wasn't designed to be finished. It's very possible that you get a lot of great ideas that were designed to get you moving, not to get you to that specific completion. And for a lot of peace protectors, especially, um, there's a lot of shame in not finishing all the, brief dopamine hits and exciting things that they were going to follow through on that prevent them from actually building on that because they just see all these things they didn't fall through on. But then, they get depressed. But then, well, maybe this one will be different. And so they try again when a lot of the things that you get inspired about were not meant to be followed through. And the ones that were, it was often premature and you were pushing too fast. Micro reflection. What creation wants to move through my calm right now? Beautiful question. And then pause. So, summary, liminal ambition framework, awareness, regulation, repatterning, expansion, integration is a dance of calm and chaos. And it's not a conflict. It is choreography. Woo! All right. We're getting close. Let me wrap things up here. Best I can. Thanks for hanging on as we got through some of those pieces. But we want to get to a transition of finding the energy of invitation inside of us with ourselves, with others. So some of you are very ready to embody this. Some of you have been embodying this, and there's something calling for like the next level is what some people might refer to it as. Um, and want to embody this, not just understand it, not just get it. I get it. Okay, cool. Well, how's it actually showing up? And financially, how's it actually showing up in your relationships? Are those expanding? Are you realizing the frames you have for each other are outdated and shattered over and over and over again, but the love is continuing to play that game? Are you finding new layers of calm and stillness while also finding ways of experiencing disruption and whatever else with a different narration? So this work is subtle. There's so much of this work that we're talking about is subtle, and we have been conditioned to not respond very significantly to subtle. We really haven't. And that's one of the challenges, is the nervous system resists both chaos and calm, and yet feels like it has to pick one or the other. Having a witness and a guide can accelerate what would take years alone. So imagine living from a nervous system that knows how to create without crashing. What would that free up for you? What could you actually create? The three frames of transformation, you can keep managing and justifying your ambition, or you can start dancing with it. Number two, belonging. You don't have to do this in isolation anymore, which high performers and peace protectors do in different versions of isolation. And it's true for both. Number three, practical. The curriculum is totally unique for doing this. It's you, and it will unfold along the way. The product is also totally unique. In this case, in this particular moment, it's me. It will unfold along the way. I have a massive amount of experience and education and training and all kinds of things and all kinds of other things, and I am loyal to none of them. For those of you who want to step into this and embody this, my loyalty is to you. I will trust you for you more than me for you. I will bring what I have, and it hasn't not been enough yet. But you are the curriculum that's unfolding actively, and I will be the product that is unfolding actively to be able to figure this out. Now, I don't ask you to jump right from that to let's go. So what I'd like to offer is an opportunity for you to connect with me. um, similar to tonight, to do my best to leave you better than I found you. And if after that conversation, not in that conversation, I want to make that very clear. If after that conversation, not in that conversation, you want to consider working with me in the different ways that that could be, those of you who feel like, well, I don't know that I can afford that. There are certain things happening right now that may change that. I did some really fun scholarship work last year for 4 people, and it was unbelievably rewarding. And that's something I'd like to do again before the end of the year, as well as some other options and different things for those of you that have different circumstances. We can talk about it, but what I'm offering is not to talk about that. What I want to talk about is the curriculum that is you and give you a chance to experience a little bit more of the product that is me. So if you'd like to drop in, spend 30 minutes together, for those of you that have not done that with me, for those of you who have, message me and let's talk. Let's see what's going on, what's different right now, and see if and communicate a little bit that way. I don't know anybody that I've already met with that's here that doesn't have access to me via email or text or whatever. All of you should have access both those ways because I reminded you with both of those for this session. So if you've met with me and really intentionally dropped in before, just one-on-one, then message me and let's talk and let's explore. And it may lead to that. It may lead to some other suggestions and whatever the case is. For those of you who haven't, or at least haven't in the last 6 months, click on the link. Let's drop in. Spend 30 minutes together and give me a chance to answer some of the beautiful questions that people asked that we didn't have time to get to tonight. Give me a chance to apply some nuance and some unique elements to what we talked about tonight and whatever else seems to come up. As those of you who know me know that I am tremendously sensitive to persuasion. The deeper you go, the younger you become, and I like to go really deep with people. I feel like I've been built to go really deep with people, and it's very important that I don't persuade you to do that work. It imprints on your nervous system that I'm somehow the answer for you. And the challenge with that is any progress we create, not any, but a lot of it feels like it's dependent on working with me. And that's not what I want. I want it to be what you created. I just happen to be there. It'll be more than that, but that's what we want imprinted on the nervous system. So if anybody's worried about, well, I don't know, I don't want him to close me, like that's so far from what I do because it seems to be um, a violation is kind of a strong word, but it seems to be antithetical to where I go, and what high performers and peace protectors are able to find from the high performer that's able to sustain the success they've created much easier and be much more available to the more important things in their life that they keep saying but aren't able to actually do and sustain in their nervous system, to the peace protector who more often than not just deserves to be in a better place financially, but has a difficult time being able to differentiate the isolation and the protection and the relief from peace and stillness and the actual activation that that can create in liminal ambition. So with that, it is my hope, it is my prayer that you will click and book something so we can chat. But regardless, thank you so much for being here. And again, if we've dropped in one-on-one in the last, 3 to 6 months, please just message me directly if you want to continue this conversation. And if you're like, you know what, I think it's time to do something, and we can talk about what some of those options are and the different places that I can meet a few of you at least. Can't I don't have room for everybody. So, all right, any last minute questions or verbal abuse?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Sammy. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you, all of you, for being here. Um, so yeah, hopefully we didn't get too out of hand in the pace there towards the end. If there's anything I shared that went over your head, don't worry. That's probably just my ego trying to sound smarter than I am. You're not an idiot. Um, this isn't everybody's language, but I'd love to drop in with you one-on-one and speak your language. I do that very well one-on-one. As a group, I just kind of decide to just let it come out and you get to hold it as you can. So, all right. That's it, everybody. You're so welcome. I hope to get to drop in with so many of you, or as well as hear from those of you I have dropped in with, and we'll go from there. So have a good night. Take care.